Welcome back to the LD Aviation Podcast, where we dive into the real stories, strategies, and standouts shaping the world of business aviation. I'm your host, Lindsay Dyer, and today we're flying into some fresh airspace with a very special guest, Greg Linton. Now, if you've been around the block or the ramp, you probably know Greg from his longtime role at Universal Weather and Aviation. He's a heavyweight in international handling, but now he's traded in his vendor badge for more of a client headset, and he's joining the HPE flight department. Yep, so it's the same industry, but it's kind of a different side of it. In this episode, we're going to talk about what it's like to enter a corporate flight department without the luxury of decades-old cheat sheets or magic binders full of tricks. Like, where do you find these tools? Do they come with your fuel uplift? They really don't. So we'll unpack Greg's journey, the curveballs he's faced, and how he's building his toolkit from the ground up, all with his signature insight and dry wit. Welcome, Greg.
Hi, Lindsay. So awesome and so glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Man, I've been counting down the days and it's finally here. So excited to talk with you and talk business aviation.
Me too, because I really think this is a topic that a lot of people have on their mind, but we just don't have a place for it to be out in the open. A lot of people come from service providers and go into the corporate setting because you guys do have such a vast level of experience, really. So,
right.
So in this episode, just for those listeners, in this episode, we are going to be working on some resources. We're going to talk about navigating new skies in business aviation, and really kind of a reality check on what it is like to come into a corporate flight department without some of those corporate skills and background. So first off, though, Greg, I really want to kind of get to know you. I want our listeners who may not know you to understand, where did you come from? Like, how did you get into aviation? So let's start with that.
Well, yeah, funny story. Growing up, I actually wanted to be a lawyer. And actually that came from all the times I got in trouble, and I used to have to talk my way out, argue my case in front of my mom, why I shouldn't be in trouble, why I shouldn't get the punishment. So that's the track I was on until one day, I never forget, I graduated high school, and I was getting ready to go to, I started out in junior college, and I was going to Broad Community College in Fort Lauderdale, and it sits right by North Perry Airport. And as I was getting off the freeway and I saw the airport and I saw the planes taking off and landing, I was smitten, right? And I'm like, wow, that is so cool. That's the coolest thing. And, after some assessment, I didn't really want to be a pilot or a mechanic. And so I wanted to be behind the scenes, really. What makes these airplanes go? I was fascinated by that. Mm-hmm. So I studied aviation administration at Broad Community College. And about a year in, I ended up talking to a Marine Corps recruiter who convinced me that I could continue my aviation career in the military because they would pay for school and they would do all these things. So I signed up for the Marines and quickly found out that sometimes things don't go as the way it is. So I started out in the infantry division, and then as soon as I got a chance to transition over to the aviation side, I went over to aviation maintenance management. So we manage aircraft engines for a couple of the fighter jets that we have, the A-8B Harrier, the A-6B Prowler, and the C-130s. So I did that throughout my military career for 8 years. And once my time in the military was up and I was transitioning, I started looking for opportunities to continue that. I'd gone back to school in the Marines at Southern Illinois University. They had an offsite campus, and I studied aviation management. And so I was looking to build on that, and I saw a ad for Universal, and I applied. They called me in for an interview, and the rest is history.
Wow! So did you even know what Universal did before you applied to them? Had you ever heard of them?
No clue. No, I never heard of Universal. I was doing the transition from the military back into civilian world. and just I was going to be in the Houston. I was going to be living in the Houston, Texas area, so I just started
Okay.
looking for opportunities throughout there. And in on a job board, I did see Universal Winter Aviation and started looking into what they did. At that time, part of my plan was to get my dispatcher certification, and
Okay.
they had a local college there that did the dispatch FAA dispatch certification. So I was already gearing to sign up for that. So it kind of just made sense. And so
Oh,
interestingly enough, I started at Universal as a flight planner. So that kind of went
wow.
hand in hand with what I was doing. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to ask a little bit. This is a little separate from aviation, but so you were in school in Florida. And then how did you end
Right.
up in
Initially. Yeah.
Houston?
Well, like I said, I one during my studies there, I ended up talking to a Marine Corps recruiter, and I figured,
Oh,
you know, it's getting expensive to pay for college. And like I said, he offered, they say, hey, we pay for college here in the military, so you can continue your studies in aviation or whatever field you wanted to. So and I signed up for the military from school in Florida, and ended up traveling the world in the military, but then settling in at the time North Carolina, to where I was working in aviation maintenance management, um, managing aircraft engines, replacing them, repairing them, building them up from the from scratch. I was on the admin side, so I was more um, I was in charge of the logs and records. I was a production controller, and so on.
okay. Awesome. Which probably gave you a really good, idea or practice on, learning about processes and documenting, and which is a lot of what flight planning is about.
Absolutely, it was everything was by the numbers. So it was about documenting your process. If
Hmm.
you touch a part on that aircraft, or the airframe, or the airframe or engine, whichever part, you had to know why you did it, and there was a checklist that you would go by and make sure that you did everything by the book and according to the technical directives. So I learned the quality control from that time. I
Hmm.
learned again process and procedures, and following that, and actually having a good process in place saved my butt a lot of times throughout my career in aviation and the military.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your journey through Universal, because you've held multiple different positions for Universal. Talk us through that. Is there, one that you really liked? Where did you start?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I when I first started on in Universal, they hired me on as a flight planner,
Okay.
and that's was intriguing, because then you do flight plans and for all the corporate jets traveling all over the world. And so it was very niche. It was very specific, and that's what you'd be doing on a daily basis. So I was going through my initial training there, to get up to speed as a flight planner. And I remember distinctly one, I can't remember how far in it was, but there was one afternoon I stayed there very late, and there had been a lot of delays throughout the ATC systems. So we're just trying to get flight plans on file, try to get CID numbers. So I just kind of stayed back. Nobody asked me to. I just kind of stayed back to do it, and just to help the guys out who were actually working on the flight plans and so on and so forth. And one of our VPs came by and said, "Hey, it's late. Everybody's gone. What are you still doing here?" I said, "Well, there was a lot of work, and just want to make sure everything, got caught up and everything." So I said, "Okay." He just kind of shook his head. It was on a Friday. And the following Monday, he called me in his office and said, "I'm going to transition you from a flight planner over to being in operations. This is where you got to talk to the clients, find out where they're going and how to get them there." And so that was intriguing. So I left from being a flight planner over to be what we call mission advisors at the time. That's what
Okay.
the title was. And so I did that for a while, and then another challenge came in. I went over to the sales side, and I worked in account management, inside sales, account management, business development. So I did that for a while as well there, and then I had opportunity to lead a team. So I became an
Uh-huh.
operations manager, and that was
Hmm.
really really fascinating, because I got to then use all the knowledge and understanding and all the tricks, and how you get clients to have their trips go successful. Everything that went into that, then I got
Hmm.
to lead a team and helping others, develop and grow in their career as well. So that was quite fascinating. So, and I did that for right up on the time until COVID came on, and once COVID hit, we all went through transition periods, and we had unfortunately we had um, some some layoffs and some
Yeah.
yes, we had some layoffs, and I got caught up in one of those, and so I was kind of on the sidelines while the industry kind of recovered. But I didn't sit
Mhm.
idle. I got a chance to work for a tax consulting firm, working with
Oh,
architects, engineers, and and in the
okay.
construction industry. So when they built energy efficient buildings, they were able to claim certain tax deductions. So it was more
Ah.
of a project management type role and the consulting role. So I did it until the industry came back online, and I went back to Universal.
So I'm kind of curious because a lot of people that I interviewed, they leave. Now yours was kind of a mandatory leave because of COVID and everything. But
Right.
um, when you left and you were like, you came back because you love aviation. I mean, I
Yeah.
guess, right?
I thought I was going to be able to, at that, because by that time it was about 20 years, going on 20 years. So I thought maybe I should, try to do something else. And that's what I
Yeah.
initially, try to do.
Hmm.
But even when I left, it was always in the back of my mind, that was still, I felt like there was still a lot left to do in the industry. I
Okay.
felt like there was a lot of unfinished business.
Yep.
So, and being with Universal, that's the only place I've known in in the business aviation world. Opportunity presented itself for me to go back and resume. So that's what I did.
That's so cool. I mean, I just see so many people, they kind of by accident start in aviation and then they just can't leave because they just love
Yeah,
it. So, so
yeah,
cool.
it's fascinating. Yeah.
Okay, so now you've kind of currently you're with a corporate flight department. So, what inspired that move
Yes.
from kind of, I want to say kind of like vendor because
Yes.
Universal is kind of a vendor to the corporate side.
Right.
Yeah. What inspired that move?
Just like I said, you're getting on into the industry and you start looking around. So, okay, is there anything else that I need to accomplish? So I felt like there was more to contribute. So I started looking for opportunities more on I thought, on the process side, on the quality control. And so I started looking at ways to scale up, right? So I went back. Being a veteran, there is a few programs out there that's available, and there was a veteran program that was through Syracuse University that was sponsored by Boeing. It's the Boeing Aerospace and Business uh, certification. That's what it was. So they
Okay.
teach you things like Six Sigma and
Oh,
um, and project management, which, like I said, I saw a lot of value in that because of the processes and so I thought a lot of value would be able to transfer over to the aviation side. So
hmm.
I started, those studies, and then in part of the program is being a veteran. Once you complete the program, then you get assigned. There's a recruiter there that's going to help you grow your career and develop your career. So I was looking for career development.
Yep.
So I pursued that, and in pursuing that opportunity, the opportunity for this corporate department that I'm with, HPE, came up, and it was just a great opportunity that I'm like, look, this is everything that you have done over the last 20 or so years. You get to then take all of that and go to a flight department and make things better and add so much value. I think that's the draw for me, the opportunity to continue to add value in a new and challenging environment. Because I felt like, I'm nowhere near retirement, right? So there's a lot left in the tank. Yeah, let's go on a new adventure. So it was just looking for that challenge, and the opportunity presented itself while pursuing another opportunity. And then, it all came together.
That's so cool. Of course, I love the corporate aviation side. I've been in that side a lot, but I can really understand the want to be able to pull it all together. And what a great opportunity to do that in a corporate flight department when they don't have, oftentimes they don't have different people to do different parts of the job. You're doing everything essentially.
Right.
Okay, so
Yes.
now that you're on the corporate side, has your perspective changed at all? Did that help? Like, how do you feel about that compared to your, I want to say, like vendor side?
Yeah. So it's eye-opening because being on the vendor side, so clients would come to you and say, "Hey, this is the mission. We're trying to go, from point A to point B.
Yep.
We're trying to go from U.S. to Europe, Europe to Africa to China, Middle East, all over the place, right?" And then you would then take the resources that you have, being a service provider, and you'd put it all together. So you would just ask the basic questions from the clients, when you want to go, where you want to go, and you just make it all happen. So you're never privy to all the stuff that goes on before that PA or that dispatcher from the client side send you that request. You had no idea what took place. So you would sit there and you had the luxury to say, man, I wish they would give us the information right away. I wish they would tell us everything, from the start so we could plan because, there's so many changes to deal with. And those changes came back, oh, we're not doing this anymore. We're not going here anymore. So then you would have to redo the trip. But, we all know the only thing that's constant in aviation is that there will be a change. So being
Yeah.
on this side and getting to meet the executives that travel, getting into that particular on the corporate side, getting to know the business that you're in, right, and understand why things happen the way they happen, and now you're privy to some of the conversations that lead into a client coming to a vendor and say, "This is why we need to do this." So being on that side was totally eye opening, and it was totally fascinating because now it all comes together. Now you have a different understanding and a
Mm-hmm.
different appreciation for the relationships that you built over the years. A lot of times you're on the vendor side, you're getting a request. Sometimes you're getting it from a dispatcher, but sometimes you're also getting it from a PA or an executive admin who's not their background is not aviation,
Right.
right? They just know that their boss wants to go here, so they don't have that knowledge to be able to articulate what it is that they're wanting to do or needing to do. And so you have to then take that and translate that into a mission plan and give it back to them and say, okay, this is how we're going to accomplish your mission. So one of the things I learned over the years was to get to understand, why are you going here? I know you're going there because your boss says we're going there, but what are you trying to accomplish? And so I used
Mm-hmm.
to use that understanding to plan and set up trips. So it's just a matter of taking that same mindset over and saying, okay, I know what happens on the execution side. I know how to get permits. I know what flight plan's going to take. I know the aircraft capabilities. But let's put it together so I can help you make the best decision of when to go, where to go, and how to get there using all that knowledge. I know that was a lot
Mm-hmm.
to unpack, but
I love it.
I try to put 20 something years in one sentence.
No, you know what I caught, what I really caught from that is I guess I never really thought about how many times you have to deal with somebody who does not work in aviation. And
Yes.
we do that a little bit on our side when we are working with the EAs who may not have any aviation experience, but that would be usually on a domestic flight. And so I think
Right.
that probably is a whole new ball game when you're working on an entire international trip with somebody who does
Oh,
not
yeah.
really know a lot of aviation.
Yeah,
Crazy.
especially traveling to Europe during the summer months, the slots that you have to deal
Sure.
with, the parking,
Yep.
and so many things happen on a daily basis, even to where the local handlers, they can't keep up, right?
Sure.
So the
Yep.
information is changing constantly. So you have to stay on top of all of that and then feed that back to an EA who then has to go back to an executive and either give them good or bad news and then have that come back to you. So being on this side, I'm able to understand, when they say, okay, we want to go to London or we want to go to Italy or we want to go to France, then I'm able to give them an understanding of what that's going to look like the moment they say we want to go there, I'm able to give them an understanding of what that's going to look like and feel like. So that's what makes things that's where you add the value and make things go a little bit smoother.
Sure. Yep. Oh, I love it. I really love all that experience coming into a corporate flight department. Okay, what is there one thing that was most surprising to you moving from universal type of work over into corporate flight department work?
Yes. So, like I said, working with a service provider or on the vendor side, because you're doing, whatever services you're providing, you're doing it for the masses, right? So you have hundreds of accounts, you have hundreds of flights, you handle so much high volume on a daily basis. Now you flip that over. to the corporate side, and especially if you go to a flight department that only has one aircraft, you only have that one aircraft to worry about. So naturally, you're thinking, "Oh, this is easy peasy. This is just a walk in the park." And then you realize that you're it, right? So where coming from a service provider where we worked around the clock, where you're 24/7. If when your shift is over, somebody else picks it up and they carry it on. You don't have that on this side, so you're it, right? So you're kind of a little bit more tethered. And so it's important to have certain resources and certain process and procedures in place, and that guides you along, so you can keep and stay on top of everything. And every flight department is different, and some you have multiple schedulers and dispatchers, some you only have one. Like in my case, we only have one, so you're it. And so your support system, your opportunity to collaborate with everybody else in the department, whether it's admin, maintenance, or flight ops, you grow into that a lot quicker because it has to get done. So you're growing to that role a little bit faster than than you would like to, even though you're coming with tons of experience. You're now on the other side, so you have to get on that learning curve and learn the lay of the land on this side. And unfortunately, that takes time. So I was quite surprised about the time it took to get ramped up and to get up to speed, to learn the nuances on the corporate side, because and I just I had to resolve it. It's okay. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight, and so I had to allow myself the time to learn and get up to speed in that role at a pace to where you could still be effective.
I totally get it. Yeah, you're right. So time. Okay, so that whole comment that you talked about brings me to my next set of questions. And so obviously you came in and I'm, I want to talk a little bit about, you came into a department that the scheduler was gone, essentially gone already. So there was nobody else to teach you how to work that department. What were maybe some of those like noticeable gaps, either in tools or resources, when you started with them?
Right. Yeah. So it's one thing to transition, and you get to your new place, and the person that you're replacing, or let's say they're moving up into another part of the company, at least they're still in the company. So,
Mm-hmm.
or if you're just coming on as an addition, right? So then at least you'll have that person to still guide you and bring you along. But where I came in is the person that I was replacing already transitioned out. So the great thing about that is they left some really good notes, right? And everything was well documented. So that's the first thing. Everything was well documented. And there were still other people in the department who, even though they weren't doing that particular role on a day-to-day basis,
Mm-hmm.
they knew enough to kind of point you in the direction you should go. But
Okay.
what made my situation really, really helpful is actually your company, LD Aviation Services. So they had an agreement with LD to provide dispatch services. So your representative was already doing a lot of the trip planning that we're doing. So I was able to get in there and latch on to that person
Mm-hmm.
and have them show me step by step the ropes, and then come in with the experience. So I wasn't learning aviation brand new. It might have been different if that was my first foray into aviation. That would have been a nightmare.
Sure.
But because I already had some knowledge of how business aviation works,
Mm-hmm.
the onboarding process went a little bit smoother. But I will say this: if it wasn't for that, for LD and having already the transition piece in place, I
Mm-hmm.
would have been in a world of hurt, right? It would have taken me a much longer to get up to speed, because they already have an understanding of how the flight department operated, where they were going. All
Mm-hmm.
the trips were already in the system, and the ones that came in while I was there, it was just I had somebody to walk me through how we set up a trip from on this side of it,
Sure.
and those little nuances, because we were using software that I hadn't used before. I had knowledge of it. I had very small, minute workings of trip planning biz, but
Mm-hmm.
I never used it on a daily basis. But you guys were, so you're able to have that transition, an onboarding period that was so tremendous in helping me get up to speed.
Well, that is awesome, and I really appreciate the kudos there. And I'll also give a shout out to the previous scheduler and your your leadership team, because I think that was, they put that in place to make sure that you weren't
Yeah,
coming into just a giant mess
abs-
and stuff. So yeah, you have a really great
absolutely.
leadership team.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. They're so they're consummate professionals. You know, they're like, listen, we're confident in the hire that we made, right? So we're giving you all the tools, but we're going to let you, do what we brought you on to do. So they gave me a lot of
Right.
room, an opportunity, and that's the part of it speaks to the culture here. The culture is like, we're not looking for you to be perfect. There's a part of our culture that says, if you're going to fail, hurry up and do it so you can get back up, learn, and get going again, right? So don't stay there. So there was a lot of leeway to come in and learn the job, and get you had real estate. You have a lot of runway, to
Sure.
to roll out and
Hmm.
get going and get airborne. So that was really, yeah, absolutely couldn't have come into a better situation.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so let's talk about some of those tools, right? So, are there any tools that you didn't have available to you internally? Like, did you have to go out and look for some?
Well, there's certain particular aspects of the job, when you're dealing with executives and their travel and the way that the regulators look at some of these travels, for example, personal use. When the executives use a corporate aircraft for personal use, there's certain,
Yep.
ways you have to go about that trip, and you have to document, and there's formulas and stuff that you have to use to calculate what that looks like on the reporting side. So getting up to speed and having understanding of those tools, where they are, how do where do I find them, and
Hmm.
how do I use them. So those are some of the things that I had to kind of dive into to get up to speed. And
Okay.
you ask around, and it's one of those 10 subjects, because you can't miss it, right? So you have to be spot on. So because of that,
Yeah.
they like to outsource a lot of those things to the industry, tax professionals, so to speak, and to get that piece right. There was, now that I'm been on this side, being a flight scheduler and dispatcher, in this our flight department, we ran our own flight plans, right? Especially on the
Yeah.
international side.
I
So
love.
what does that tool look like? What are we using to do that? And how do I check to make sure that I did a flight plan correctly? So going and finding out, those resources, and finding out, is your training available? If it is, how often? And, is it virtual? Is it in person? So you had to seek out those tools and those resources, and make sure that you can use them. Not because it's there, that doesn't mean you can use them, because it may not be configured to fit your flight department. So then you
Sure.
have to go make sure that that piece is taken care of.
Man, I want to point out, I think you had said, they were confident in their hire. And I think that's awesome because obviously you went out and found that. You're not
Yeah.
a person who sits back, because I was going to ask you, who do you turn to, when you don't know? But it sounds like you went out and you talked to your other vendors, you talked to the team members inside, and oh,
Yeah, you just start reaching out, and being somebody who's been to scheduled dispatchers, IOC, um, base a lot, actually. So I had the opportunity to facilitate a couple classes at NBAA. I was a SME at IOC. So I knew enough in the industry, and I wasn't afraid to go to somebody who's been in that role that I'm now in, even though
mhm,
I'm not, with all those, I wasn't afraid to go there and say, hey, how do you do this? Right. So I found out, through networking, all the other, my, former colleagues, what are you using, how are you using it, and I know every department's different, but give me the gist of how you use it, and then I would seek out people to talk to, and find out best practices, right? And I think I was at SND earlier this year, and in one of the class I raised my hand and said, hey, all these resources and tools sound great, where do I find them?
mhm.
And it was crickets, because they expect the
Yeah.
flight departments to come up with their own. So I said, "Is this centrally located somewhere?" And they're like, "Nope, there's nothing out there. You kind of just have to find your own." So I just started talking to a lot of the other dispatchers that were there, and get best practices and tools and tricks of the trade. Yeah.
Isn't that okay? So you and I talked about this a little bit online or offline before we started recording, Greg, and I really think you've hit on an issue that we have in this industry. Like there really isn't a central place, at least at the moment, for all of these things. So when you're coming in, like you came in with a lot of experience, so you have people in the industry you could ask for. You knew where to go to get help. But some people are coming in with, they don't even know anybody. They're maybe brand new.
Right.
Anyway, and I don't have a fix for it quite yet, but I do believe this is a problem with in our industry. We have got to find a place that is centrally available to everybody who's doing this type of job.
Yep. Absolutely. And, one of the things that people tend to lean on, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. So I'm not speaking out against the FAA certified dispatcher's license. But as we all know, that's geared towards commercial operations. It's geared for you to work in an airline and do their, do the job there. As a matter of fact, if you were to start out doing your FAA dispatch license right now, even the flight planning piece of it, they're doing that by hand, right? Yeah. They're, which is very important because you need to know the charts and you need to know how to, put a route string together and all of that. So that's very important, right? But that's not going to be your daily job when you go into the corporate world, right? It's going to look differently. So is there so to speak, you have a 121 dispatch? Is there a 91 dispatch that would encompass everything you're going to do that's common to all flight departments, all 91 flight departments? Yep. What are those commonalities? What are those tools that you would need? What are those know-how? Now, you go on some of these websites that talk about these things, and it's very high level. And I get why it's high level because every flight department's different. But I dare say you can go a little bit deeper than, to the next level and find out, okay, this, like personal use calculations, this is common among all flight departments who, have this, who have to, who do these transactions. Right. I'm just using that as an example. But other things, how do I know I did my flight plan really, how do I know I put my flight plan together, as a 91 operator? Because the same rules don't apply, right?
No, I love it. And this is a topic I get so excited. You and I spoke before, we get so excited about this, or passionate, maybe I could say, because I think, like you were talking about SEC reporting and personal use. Right. And I don't think people understand how important that actually is, because we're calculating it or we're helping calculate that.
Capture it, yeah.
Yes. And that's actually on the CEO's public, what is the report? It's a public report that goes
proxy, out. Yeah. It's a proxy.
Report. Yes. Yeah. Not only that, but SIFL. Same type of thing. Yeah. SIFL's going into somebody's actual W-2, and so we are affecting some real important pieces of other, other and high level executive reporting. And so I wish that there was a place where we could explain not only here's how you should do it, but here's why it matters.
Right. And in those, exactly. And in simplest terms, right? Yeah. Because I've looked at some formulas out there and some tools out there, and the longer I stare at it, the more complicated it looks, right? Because there's so many nuances that go into that. And, there's so many other aspects as well on the safety side, right? How does safety factor into a dispatcher and a scheduler, right? Yeah. So, on the pilot side, we worry about the fatigue factors. We worry about the crew resource management. Mm-hmm. Does that get extended over to the dispatcher and scheduler? Because if I'm up flight following a flight all night long, and I have a great situation where if I'm up flight following a flight all night long, I'm not required to come, they don't say, okay, well, you ended that flight following at 2 a.m. Now be back at 6 for your regular shift, right? So, so every situation is different. But there's so many other factors that come into it. How do you track fatigue as a dispatcher or a scheduler, right? Where does that factor in your wellness and fitness for duty, right?
I totally agree.
There's there's so many other areas that,
There totally is. And I'll also bring into light a little bit the fact you're doing flight planning for your department. Now, not a lot of Part 91s do the flight planning. However, I think it's an awesome skill to have, because not only is it good for job security, but it helps put a second pair of or set of eyes for safety on those flight plans. I highly recommend
Exactly.
everyone learning that. But have you ever seen a tool out there that teaches you how to flight plan other than just regular experience? I haven't seen one. So
No,
I don't know if it exists.
it's very high level. And like I said, even if you go back to the dispatcher's course, you're learning to do flight plans for 121 operations, and the aircraft performance and everything is different. Now the concepts are the same in terms of performance and navigation, all that stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
specific to what you're going to be doing, I haven't seen that on the level that you would say, okay, I can really plug into that. Even if you go to even if in my doing flight plans, and I go to my service provider for flight plans, the videos that you get, sent, hey, this is how to do this, they don't always, match up. So you have to kind of dig a little bit more and go a little bit deeper to really get what, because, the flight plan is critical, right? Very, very critical. So what I like about doing flight plans is it's an
Yes.
opportunity to collaborate with the flight crew and get to understand a little bit
Yeah.
more from their side. What goes into making that. That's the last piece, right? So because we do all the planning, what makes the mission go is to get in an airplane and fly across the pond or fly across the country wherever you need to go from point A to point B. You have to get there some kind of way, and so you need, an effective flight planning is very, very key. So, and understanding those elements, even if you're not doing it on a daily basis, understanding the elements that goes into a flight plan is very critical.
Yep. It totally is. And then I think where you're talking about under, not doing it on a daily basis. I will see some schedulers that are like, hey, I don't want to do it domestically because those are really easy. But I'm going to argue the fact that unless you have a lot of experience like you've had many years of experience on flight planning, so it's probably not a big deal. But those schedulers, dispatchers that might be starting out, I think the domestic side is where you start. You start learning
Yeah.
and you do every single domestic flight plan and you learn that and you get it down and then you move into the international stuff.
Exactly, because it's going to get you comfortable with the aircraft performance. It's going to get you
Yes.
comfortable working within that flight planning tool. You're going to know where all the buttons are
Mm-hmm.
and what does what, and you're going to learn so much about it because then when you're taking that and then doing an international flight plan, you just operate in a different airspace. But you're still going to need to understand, the dynamics of how that tool works, and
Yep.
nothing gets you more comfortable than doing it. And I'll also take it a step further. You can create some dummy practice trips, right? So you don't have to actually do it, practice on a live. You don't have to,
Sure.
if you're not doing flight plan on a daily basis, so you don't have that live practice, but you can still practice. You can make up some trips. You can make up all the scenarios you want to make up and practice them because sooner or later you're going to have to deal with it at one point or the other. So might as well, get up to speed on that.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
Well, I've kind of brought us down a little tangent there on something that I know both of us are passionate about. So let me bring us back a little bit more to perhaps what is there one or two tools that you have found working on the corporate side now that you just love? You think it's awesome?
Well, so the data tells a story, right? So anytime you want to know anything that's
Okay.
going on in your organization, there is an input somewhere and there's an output somewhere, right? So if you work within a particular flight planning software, or you work with a trip planning software, there's so many things that's in there, like the one
Mhm.
we use trip planning biz, right? So there's so
Mhm.
many things that's in trip planning biz that I can go to and get information because it tells historical. So if I want to find out if I'm doing the scheduling side and I want to find out, you know, how many hours, a pilot, you know, have been, flying, so I can
Okay.
use that to say, okay, this one's been flying, 30 hours and this one's at 20 or whatnot. I
Wow.
can go in there and I can get the data, um, and help me make that decision.
Sure.
So any tool, the tools that track, um, you know, pilot flying is good for me to use as a scheduler because in that I can then keep things, balanced, especially in those organizations that have, multiple aircraft that have, you know, 10, 15, 20 pilots that you're managing. Having a good
Yeah.
tool to manage that helps you. So I would say look at whatever software you're using, look within
Hmm.
there to see what's there that can help you, one, tell the story and help you manage on a day-to-day basis and can track. So when you start doing reports and everything, you know where to go. So that's what I've found so far that helps me on a day-to-day basis on the scheduling side.
That's awesome. I think that's a really
It's
good
a little
point.
bit, yeah, yeah, it's a little bit easier for me. We only at the moment, we're not scheduling a fleet, so
Sure.
it's not as complicated, but it can be because in the event that we have, 3, 4, 5 aircrafts or whatnot, then you're going to have to start, then you're going to rely on tools a lot more than you were before.
Very true. And so maybe that brings me to my next question. And this is about processes. So right now you're kind of setting it up. And like you said, okay, so it's one
Yeah.
airplane. But what if you get 2, 3, 4, 5 airplanes? I mean, I really think it's important to set those processes up so that they would work and be able to be scaled. So, any tips on how to build those internal processes?
Well, yeah. So obviously you start with what you have. So pay close attention, even if it's the simplest of trips. So pay close attention how you set those trips up on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is you have a certain, you have a checklist. So you go down your checklist.
Mm-hmm.
But because you've done things so often, you think, I noticed by heart, I'm just going to do it. So then you deviate from that. And so what I would say is follow your process and then see which areas, as things happen and develop, you don't want to just start adding things to that process because this anomaly came up, but you do want to capture it and you do want to make a note of it. So what I would say is follow your process and look for areas that absolutely needs to be improved and not necessarily just to plug everything you come up with in there because then you're going to have a convoluted process, right? So you want to follow that
Very
process
true.
and document how it flows, how it goes, and then tweak it as you need to, right? Not because you just, okay, this sounds better, so let me redo this. So next trip, you're doing something totally different from what you did the last time, and next thing you know, you've pulled on that thread, and the whole ball of yarn's coming undone, right? So I would say, you know what a successful mission looks like or supposed to look like. So you
Mm-hmm.
follow that, step one, step two, step three, step four, have the conversations. For example, we do pre-flight briefs. I sit in on those pre-flight briefs. They have post-flight briefs. I sit in on those post-flight briefs and I ask questions, right? And then as I'm asking these questions, whether it's pre or post, I'm looking at what the documentation is and what it says. How was it supposed to happen? How
Mm-hmm.
far off did we deviate or go or had to go from what was documented? And then look and see if that's how you identify breakdowns before they happen, right? So if you're doing something and it consistently leads to this output or this result, then you want to go back and look at, well, what was the input,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you keep track of your process, keep track of your steps, and make sure that you're doing them, as you go along, right? So I think that helps keeps you on track. The moment you start thinking, okay, I have all this experience, I can do this without thinking about it or whatnot, then that's when you set yourself up for trouble. So I approach each trip the same way from a concept perspective.
I love that. Just, do the same way every time. And those anomalies, I agree. Like, don't put every single one of them in there because it'll be just a giant mess. Really good point.
Right,
Yep.
exactly. Yeah, but you want to keep notes so in case it does come up again, so you have an idea of what happened on that trip. But I wouldn't say take everything and just throw it in there because then your your 1 or 2 page checklist becomes 100 pages, and then you're not going through it because by the time you get to item number 26, you're lost, and you're like
Yeah.
haven't gotten to the and keep it organized as well as it pertains to the trip and how it affects each particular mission. And so you still want to check for everything that you're doing.
Yep. Totally makes sense. Okay. You talked about using your peer networks, and you also kind of talked about the mentorship a little bit when it was with the veterans program.
Right.
Um, any advice to others, like whether to use that or not?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's because, to me, that's a resource. So like I said, when I went to S&D down in New Orleans, actually, I think somebody sent a message out with two or three people on there, say, hey, we're going to sit together at lunch and we just want to talk together about, just our world. And then that list grew, right? So it went from 3 to 10 to 20 to 25, 30. And we go and there's two tables of just scheduling dispatchers sitting there. We're talking shop, we're talking stories. And so I brought the conversation to, hey, how do you do this? And then we started talking, and there are lots of dispatchers that started talking about how they do things, right? And I want to say we talked, and I was talking to I think Andrew Fuller, a
Oh,
great,
yeah.
great guy. Yeah, Andrew is awesome. And actually, Andrew was in my role many moons ago before I got here. So it's somebody that I look up to in terms of in the business aviation industry, ton of knowledge.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, we're both talking. I said, we need to find a way to continue the conversation beyond these these conventions. So we go to NBAA, we go to S&D, we go to IOC, but that's the only times we tend to talk as
Yeah.
industry experts, right? Or as colleagues. That's the only time we tend to talk. So what would it look like if we had a forum after, where we start having these conversations of how do you do this? Who do I reach out to? So you start building that list, right, of all the people you met, and you still have that email that was sent out. So there's a plethora of people on there, and so we can start reaching out. As a matter of fact, about a month or so after SND, somebody did send an email and said, "Hey, I'm working on this issue. What are some of the things you have done in terms of this?" And then just to see the responses start going back. So, but what if we did that, let's say, on a quarterly basis or we still have NBAA, we still have those great resources. So we're not replacing any of that. It's just continuing the conversation because it's in talking through things that you understand how other people are dealing with this very same issue that you're dealing with. Another colleague of mine called me about 2 weeks ago and said, hey, we're setting up our international operations. Can we talk and pick your brain a little bit about what you're doing over there? And so we got on the phone and we talked for about 30 minutes and talked through some things. Talked a little bit about how I'm doing it, how they're doing it, and we could take from each other and put it together, right? But what happens after that? Then you document it, and so you have a template, and then pretty soon, once you get all the inputs, then you can then share that template, right? But you share it amongst your colleagues, But going back to the earlier point, what if there were a central location? What would that look like? To share all these resources and all these conversations that took place.
I love it. I want it. Let's figure it out. Let's do it.
Yes, we got to figure it out. Yes.
Yes, I think it's really needed. I love it. So,
yeah.
Okay, so let's kind of shift a little bit and talk to those listeners who might be either contemplating a change in roles or maybe they're just brand new into a new role. Is any suggestions or what would you like to tell that person who's transitioning into a flight department from the outside?
Well, and I would say if it's a great opportunity to begin with, but I would say you do have to do some soul searching, right?
Right.
You have to have an understanding where you are, right? And where you want to go and how you're going to get there. But more importantly, when you get there, what are you bringing, right? What's the value are you adding, right? Or, can you still accomplish what are your aspirations, right? What are you aspiring to do or to be? What do you want to get out of this role or this career? If I make a move, is it going to help my career? Am I going to continue climbing? Or, what does that look like? So you really have to have those conversations. And the first conversation you want to have is with yourself, right? And get a good perspective of where you are, do a talent inventory, right? What skills do I have now? If I'm going to make this move, what skills do I need to develop or go get and hone before I make that jump, right? And then start talking to people who are already in that field that you want to go into or in that role that you want to go into. Start your networking there just to get an understanding, right? Because in doing all of that, you're going to find out a couple of things. It's not what I thought it was. Or, hey, I'm excited. Let's keep going. and have those honest conversations so that when you do make that jump, that you're not going in you're going in with your eyes somewhat open. Right now, you're going to get there and things are going to be different because it's different, right? But at least you have some idea of what you're getting into. And then it's very important, if especially if it's a role that you're going to be going into, you're leveling up. You
Mm-hmm.
want to talk to people at that level and then probably two levels above that
Good
to
point.
get an understanding of what that vision looks like. When, if, for example, if it's a VP or a director, and you want to say, okay, what are your expectations of someone in this role? Right?
Mm-hmm.
When somebody new comes into this role, what does the first month look like for them? What's the first 60 days, 90 days? What does that look like? So you get an understanding of what you're getting into. And then once you decide, okay, this is something I want to do, then just, you know, get after it. Right? You can
Yep.
wait around, you can hesitate, you can wait for something to fall in your lap, but I dare say it's not going to happen that way. You're going to have to you're going to have to put some work behind it
Yeah.
and get after it.
Yeah. Oh, such a good point. I love the idea of going out and asking, what does success look like in the 30, 60, 90 days, even a year?
Yeah,
What will you have accomplished in these times? Because that makes both parties know what is expected and
right.
what they can expect, basically.
I was going to say, if there's anything missing that you need before you make that jump, then you can that's something you can start working on. So that way you'll be in a better position when that opportunity does happen and you get to make that move.
Very true. Yep, totally true. Is there anything that you wish somebody had told you before you made this move?
Oh, that's that's a that's a good one. So you know, like I said, I came into a very unique situation, and
Yeah.
it's great because of what they foster. Right? It's like ambition unleashed. Right? So if you have talent, if you have the talent and you have the experience, we're gonna let you use it. So I wish that if I put anything on it, I would say I wish that I understood a little bit more of what the conversations look like when you're talking to like an EA or a PA, or now you're having different conversations with a pilot or or the maintenance or the aircraft maintenance techs of the intricacies of operating the airplane. Like I said, being on the vendor side, they're coming to you and say, okay, this is the type of aircraft that we're operating, right? So
Mhm.
I just need some basic information. What's the max takeoff weight? What's the range? So, and then I just put that into a flight plan and off we go. But, understanding, what makes that aircraft ready for flight, the things that go into that,
Mhm.
right? You need to have an understanding because that goes into the scheduling, right? Because yeah, and you have to have those conversations with the EA. So yeah, I know you want to leave, but the plane's going through maintenance right now, and it's whatever phase you know inspection it is, and having those conversations when maintenance comes up, and having to explain to someone why the jet's not available.
Mhm.
It doesn't happen very often, but understanding those conversations and how to have those conversations
Mhm.
is good to know before you get there, because then once you get there, and then people looking to you and they're expecting you to, you know, know some things and do some things, and you may not be ready yet. So that's where a good career coach would come in and help. I didn't go that route. So yeah,
No, that's great. Because often those are, once you've been doing it for long enough, there are certain things that you're going to talk about. When is the
right,
return time? Like, when does that airplane come back? When can I actually use it?
right,
Yeah. Um, you're right. Okay, so conversations. That's cool. That might be a cool new topic we could talk all about.
yeah,
Conver-
conversations, yeah, yeah.
So, Greg, what's next for you in your role there at HPE?
Well, so I am um, still just about a year in this role, so I'm still on the learning curve.
Mm-hmm.
And what's exciting about this role is not just it's a lot more than just the scheduling side and the dispatch side. Actually, the official title within the organization is business services, supervisor of business services management. So
Okay.
not just the day-to-day operations of the aircraft,
Mm-hmm.
but also there's a business side. So there's vendor relations that you deal with.
Mm-hmm.
There's contracts to set up. And so for me is delving a little bit more on that side of all these vendor contracts that we these partnerships and these relationships we have, that's related to the flight department, developing on that side to make sure that
Yep.
the contracts that we do have, the vendor relations that we do have, how is that working, right? Is it doing everything it's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to do? Are we getting everything that we need to
Mm-hmm.
get from it? What's working, what's not working? So looking on that side to see where we can develop efficiencies and effectiveness. Not because we have all these subscriptions, we have all these things, right? Are they all needed? So going through that list of things that we have as a flight department and seeing, does it still make sense to do all these things that we're doing? Because then part of it is efficiency, right? So we want to be very efficient. So for me, the next, continue to grow on the scheduling and dispatching side, but also on the business services side, develop and grow there as well through understanding what those vendor relations look like and those relationships that we have on those sides. How can we all get better to make sure that we're still serving each other with the mission that we have at hand? So, and working for a tech company is
I
quite fascinating, right? So,
it is
what
actually.
technologies out there, right? How can we, yeah, how can we leverage some of those technologies that's out there that everybody else is using? How can we leverage that on our day to day? So I'm looking forward to learning a lot about those resources and tools that we have, understanding what they do and how can they help, not just me, but how can they help, us as schedulers and dispatchers, how can that help us be better? Because for me, it's constant working on yourself, working on your craft. How can I get better,
That's
right? And how can I get better in time? Not just necessarily, okay, I learned something new today, let's discard it and go, but how can I continue to use that in the day to day and get better from that?
right. Mm-hmm. I'm
Yeah.
really excited to kind of hear how maybe I could check in with you in another year, but it'd be so interesting to see what you found in the efficiencies, because when I come into a flight department and we look at what software is being used, I would say majority of the time there's some sort of overlap there, or something that is a program offers and has available,
Yeah,
but you don't either know that it's available, or they're not
exactly.
using it. They're not using it to its fullest extent. And I think that's very important for any organization to go through and audit that.
Yes. That's so huge, Lindsay, what you just said. I think right there is auditing what you already have,
Yep.
and understanding what it is, and if it's been fully utilized,
Yeah.
right? It's amazing once you start digging. Like I said, you asked earlier, and I said, well, I start, a lot of the tools that I have now, I'm looking within them to see, am I using everything that this thing does as it pertains to what we
Yeah.
need to accomplish as a flight department, right? And if not,
Mm-hmm.
why not, right? And then setting up the time, maybe you say, okay, 1 day a week or 2 hours a week, I'm going to dedicate to learning what this is and how, I can use it to be better. So I love that. I love that what you just
Mm-hmm.
proposed just now.
I'll just throw a really short example out there that when we come into flight departments, the number of flight departments, EAPIS, that their
Yeah,
scheduling software does file EAPIS, which is a relatively
right.
easy process, right? And all the information is in there, but they will pick up all that information and hand enter it into another software system
Software.
to get it to go out. And I'm like, now
Mhm.
there's opportunities for error right there. Why are we not using the
Yeah,
original location for that data? Anyway, that's just, I see that piece
right. Yeah, I think
quite
yeah,
often. So,
yeah, those yeah, managing those
uh,
efficiencies is a challenge in itself. And I think it comes from comfort, right? I'm more comfortable You're thinking to yourself, I'm more comfortable if I take it out of here and I manually put it in over here, right? But not realizing that there is, there's so many holes lined up in that Swiss cheese, right? For you to just have a really bad error, and now you missed the transmission or you transmitted the wrong information. Now you have a customs issue, and when you start peeling back the layers and you're doing a root cause analysis, you go back, oh, I manually transcribe this information. Well, did you need to? No. Well, was there something I already did it? Yeah. So all you really need to do is verify the information is correct by what looking at the output before you hit submit, right? And then go from there. So that's key.
Yep, totally. Well, Greg, you've had some really great highlights today. What if somebody who's listening wants to contact you? Where's the best place to do that?
The best place to do that is on LinkedIn. So you can go to my LinkedIn page, and you just once you type in Greg Linton, you'll see my profile come up, and you can send me a message. I love to hear from you. I love collaboration. I love information, transferring of knowledge. I love listening to others and hear about their experiences and how they do things. And then, through conversation, maybe we can pick up, a thing or two from each other and go from there. So I love the conversation about business aviation, the know-hows. I did at Universal, I did a few blogs. Every time there was a special event or something, I wrote a few blogs, and I was always excited for that transfer of knowledge. And when I got the opportunity to be a subject matter expert at IOC back in the day, I loved it because it got to talk about experiences and talk about what's happening and how to best go about it. So, and even when I was setting up my trips, I would always find out the best way to do it, or seek out the best way to do it, and then turn around and share that with the next person, because we all get better from shared and applied knowledge. So I love to continue the conversation. Feel free to reach out anytime, and then we can go from there.
Great. Greg, I think I'm just going to add one real quick thing. That is like a breath of fresh air, I feel like, because, and you and I have been in this industry for a long time.
Yeah.
I think it's changing now, but this could be a whole nother podcast, but we have been so like closed in and not sharing information for so long that I think people just really need that nudge. Like, we need to be reminded about what you just said. We need to share information with each other. It's not hurting us at all by sharing these processes. So I would love to encourage more people, just like you did, to share their experiences, share their processes. Yeah,
absolutely. It helps us all, right? Because we all on the same mission at the end of the day, right? We all trying to be better. We all trying to have successful missions from point A to point B. And, there's a safety of flight factor involved. So, so we all want to see everybody succeed in that regard. So whatever I can do to help move that cause along, I'm happy to do it.
Awesome. Well, Greg, thank you so much. That was an awesome conversation. I'm super passionate about some of the same things you are. I just can't wait till we get like a central hub for all of this stuff, and we can share some more. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's the tip of the iceberg. There's, you can't just pack, 20 some. Well, how many? I think you're on the 20 plus side. I'm on the 20 plus side. And then you start everybody that comes on the podcast. You can't cram all of that in one, in one session. So what we did today was a tip of the iceberg. So I look forward to continuing the conversation. And I just want to say, what you're doing is so awesome. Having the table, inviting people to the table to have these discussions. Because when you hear it, then you might follow it. You might delve a little bit deeper and do a deeper dive, and you learn so much more. So I commend you and applaud you for all that you're doing with LD Aviation Services. I know if I need to take a vacation, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're my backup, right? So you're gonna get that call and say, hey, and then you guys can step in and seamlessly do. I can come back from my vacation and pick up where you guys are left off. So. Kudos to what you've built at LD Aviation. I really, really love it. And like I said, that was a saving grace for me when I started out. You helped my job go so much smoother. Just everybody that I've talked to at LD Aviation have been awesome. So kudos to y'all.
Wonderful. So glad to hear it. Well, thank you again, Greg. Really wonderful conversation. And if any of our listeners are feeling a little bit seen after that conversation, because I feel like there are people that have done this transition, or maybe you're just figuring these things out currently. Really just remember that nobody is starting with this perfect checklist. It takes time to build that. Sometimes you have to build your own. Sometimes you have to craft or adjust one that's already there. Borrowing from your network is also a great idea. So if you enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and give us a like and share it or give us a rating. Any of that helps us keep delivering the content that keeps you ahead of the game. So wonderful. Thank you again, Greg. And thanks for tuning in to the LD Aviation Podcast. And until next time, keep your coffee hot, your ops sheet accurate, and your phone turned on. We're so glad you joined us for this episode of the LD Aviation Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, share, and follow. Your support helps us keep the conversation going and grow our amazing community.